Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Eden Road podcast, where in this week's episode we're going to be talking about the 1-0 home defeat against Man City, as well as having a look back over the season so far. Joining me today is Dan. Dan, how are we?
I'm all good. 1-0 on paper doesn't sound bad at all, does it? But I think there's a few good bits, I think, and also a few bad bits that we're going to discuss today.
Absolutely plenty for us to talk about. You may notice that Mike is not with us today. Mike, unfortunately, is a bit under the weather and unwell at the moment, so we send him all our best wishes. Hopefully, he gets soon because we do appreciate him being here and the time that he spends. Please, before we get started, remember to like, comment, subscribe on the videos, and do follow us on our socials at Eden Road on Twitter and at Eden Road Pod on Instagram. So what I will do is we'll start with the tweet of the week this week, Dan, and it's one I found which was a response to a tweet from a quote of Erling Haaland. And it says, Erling Haaland on Brentford. It reminded me of Stoke City and Rory Delap 15 years ago. Now, I'm not sure, for one, whether I take that as a compliment or criticism. And then the response to that was, the happy clappers will somehow find a way to claim Erling Haaland has a deep agenda against Brentford, rather than just accept how dreadful a watch Keith Andrews has made us. Look at how well we sat back and held on to our 1-0 deficit yesterday. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think it's a bad thing to be compared to that Stoke team. They caused people a lot of problems. They're still being spoken about nowadays. No one liked to go there. Can you do it on a cold, rainy night in Stoke? So they certainly left their mark on teams more than, a lot of other Premier League teams who have been and gone in the past 10, 15 years. I think we've been saying all season that the long flows are great. The set pieces are great, but we do need to do a little bit more in general play. And it doesn't bother me so much against teams like Man City. I don't think we're ever going to be able to go toe to toe fully with Man City and get a result. It bothers me more against teams like Fulham. It bothers me more if we do it in a couple of weeks against West Ham and we don't really try and play a bit more football, especially if we set up in a back five in those games. But it doesn't bother me in these games. I think, City are a really good team. 1-0 on paper is not a bad result. I do agree. And what baffled me the most and infuriated me the most, which we'll go on to talk about, is why we did look like we were just holding on to a 1-0 defeat. And that is what is not good enough. And that is what I just completely don't understand where Keith Andrews is coming from. But I think just talking about this game, I think there are good elements as well and things that he, I can't really point the finger at him on that. But yeah. I think the big concern is that the subs, all that, we'll talk about it. But I just don't understand.
I remember seeing videos and clips of when Rory Delap was at Stoke and teams used to put the ball out for corners rather than him having the ball and throwing it in. And if, Michael Coyote gets that sort of stuff happening where we're putting the ball out for a corner, teams are putting the ball out for a corner rather than him getting a throw on. Yeah, Pete Barkley's football.
I'd rather us having it. I get more excited now when we have a throw-in level with the box than when we have a corner, because we never seem to do anything from corners. The delivery is always a bit off. Coyote, you know where it's going. You just need a lucky bounce, a lucky ricochet, get the flick on, and then it causes chaos. So, everyone seems to be doing it this year, but we are the best at doing it. And, it's a good thing. We don't want to take that out of our game. I don't think we can be criticised for doing that. It's just we need to do a bit more.
Absolutely not. So let's have a little chat about the lineup going into this. We spoke after the United game about what we really expect going into City. Now, I for one fully expected us to go for a back five. I would have liked us to take that risk and go for a 4, but we start with a back five and Christopher Ayer steps in instead of Ethan Pinnock in that back five. When that lineup comes out, Dan, what are you thinking?
Well, I know you used to be on my side with all these back fives, and now recently you're turned into a back 4 man. But I reckon against these top teams, the real top teams, not like your Man United who aren't really playing like a top team, but against like the real top 3 or 4, definitely Liverpool, Arsenal, City, I think a back 5 is still the way to win the game. Now, you're always going to get people when we inevitably don't win. They'll say, well, we should have played a back 4 then. Well, I think that's a bit flawed because we'll lose the majority of our games against those teams anyway. We need a bit of luck going our way. We'll talk about it again, but if certain chances went our way, if Thiago scored that chance in the second half, we come out with something in this game. So I don't disagree with the back five. I don't disagree with Aya coming in for Pinnock. I think we've had a few moments over the years when Haaland's turned Pinnock a little bit inside out. So I think we need a bit more mobility. I think in the back three when we're facing up against someone like him. I didn't disagree with the approach from the start. I still don't disagree with it if that's how we line up against Liverpool in a couple of weeks. I thought we were too passive first half, but I don't think that was down to the shape. I thought we improved in that second half without changing the shape. So I'm not against it, and I don't really understand why everyone is clamoring for a back four all the time against these top teams, when if you look back over the years, the majority of our results, the good results we've had against these top 3 or 4 teams were when we played a back five. And I just think it's a little bit unrealistic to think we can kind of match City and play through them, because I don't think we'll be able to anyway.
We're never going to out football teams like Manchester City. One of the old boys that stands next to us he's shouting, "We're making them look good. We're making them look good." It's like
they are quite good.
What do you really expect? Like, it's like we need to be pressing them. We need to be putting tackles in, and it's like we're sitting back and they're still playing around us with a back five. If we push them higher, it's just going to make it easier, open them gaps for them. Now, I am on your side, Dan. I swear I am on your side that I think that a back five was the right thing for this game. But I just think that we were so fluid against Man United that it almost felt like we shouldn't change it. Get a bit of consistency. If we're going to take a risk and go for a back four. If we start with a back four and we're 2-0 down inside 30 minutes, then people will then go, I know it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, but they go, should have gone to a back five. But then we'll play against Liverpool in a couple of weeks. We'll go to a back five and they go, why have you gone to a back four? It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't.
It's the deception of Manchester United as well, though, because I think we all think that they should be good. They've got good players. But the reality is they're not that good. So you can get away with playing a back four against them and still looking quite good. But, I'd go back to the Chelsea game. We played a back five against Chelsea. They're a better team than Man United. They're probably not quite as good as Man City, but they're good. They're better than us. They would expect probably to win that game. We played well, generally. We got a 2-2 draw. We did have chances going forward. I don't think that worked in the same way against City. I think it was a bit off the connection, especially up front. We weren't able to get those chances on the break as regularly as we did against Chelsea, but I didn't think the plan was wrong. That was the right way to go about it. I thought the first half particularly was just poor execution in terms of we weren't pressing enough. We weren't aggressive enough. You can still press. You can still be aggressive when you're playing a back five. We just weren't doing it in that first half.
Yeah. So speaking of being aggressive and doing that pressing, we'll talk about Haaland's goal. The ball obviously is a long ball over the top towards Haaland. And I've watched it back a couple of times and I'm still not quite sure yet whether I think that Sepp gets caught out or if Haaland is just too big and too strong for him in that moment. Because as the ball comes in, it looks like Sepp runs underneath it, gets the wrong side of Haaland. And then once you're the wrong side of a striker in that area, there's not really much that you can do. I mean, breezes past Collins, but obviously you can't put a challenge in that sort of space and puts it in the bottom corner. But does Sepp have to do better, or is Haaland just too good in that situation?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, it's a very Haaland goal. I don't think we'll see many other strikers score that type of goal, but you've seen Haaland score that type of goal before. So, maybe Sepp should have been a bit more aware of who he's up against today. That, Haaland would pose that physical challenge, that he might not win those duels against Haaland as he would against other strikers. So maybe, anticipate it a bit better. Definitely don't let him the wrong side of you. And maybe also Collins, as we've got a back five, as Haaland is the only striker, maybe he could be a bit closer to him to try and cover. So it's a Haaland goal that we see so much. That was his first goal at Gtech though, so it's finally off the mark.
It feels like when we play a back five, we've got the overload in the defensive players to be able to double up on a player like Haaland. Yeah, it felt like he had so much freedom in that first half, especially to be able to kind of move where he wanted, do what he wanted, drop into those spaces that he was finding it in a back five, which is where my mindset of if you're going to find that space in a back five, what's the point in having 5 defenders there? You might as well just have that extra player going forwards. So it's a difficult one. Like you say, it's a very Haaland goal. We probably won't see very many strikers score many goals like the way that he does as well. There's another really big talking point in the first half, and that's Rodri going off injured. Now, we saw Rodri injured for a lot of last season and how City's defensive frailties were highlighted when he wasn't part of that team. I think it's like the 25th or 26th minute that Rodri goes off. And I do think that it changes the game ever so slightly because up to that point, it didn't feel like we had anything at all. He was marshalling it. And then I think Nico Gonzalez comes on and they just change. Something's different about City without Rodri. And it's funny because not one player makes a team, but when that one player is Rodri and you take him out of the midfield, it completely changes the game, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, I think their record speaks for itself with him out of the team or with him in the team. I don't know whether we were just too passive to begin with, though, and as the game went on, Keith Andrews did get into him, especially at half time, and we were just more aggressive in that second half. So I don't know how much it was down to Rodri not being there or us just improving our performance and playing the back five better. Like you can play a back five, even with spaces like you were talking about in defence. You could argue there might be even more space if it's about 4 and not about 5. But secondly, you can argue that we could just play the back five a little bit better, get close to each other. I don't think it was a system problem. I think we just weren't good enough. We were maybe not confident enough in that first half. And maybe Rodri coming off might have had a small impact and we might have thought, oh, Rodri's come off. They're not normally as good when Rodri's not on the pitch. But there was just something about the way we started the game. It was too passive. We almost showed them too much respect. It's like we didn't really believe that we could get anything out of the game, which is a shame because we've got a good home record. We've beaten them before. A lot of the same players have beaten them before. And at the end of the day, we weren't actually that far off from this time. But yeah, it just wasn't quite enough. So I don't know if it was Rodri or whether it was just we improved as a team a little bit after half time.
Yeah. Now, Kelleher makes a really big save from Reinders' effort. Ball comes across and he catches it like sweetly, doesn't he, Reinders, for that chance. And it is a very quick reaction save from Kelleher. And I don't feel like we can question his shot stopping, really, can we?
No, he's the best shot stopping keeper I think we've probably had, even maybe including David Raya in that, because he's clearly not as good with the ball at his feet as definitely Raya and probably even Flecken. He definitely needs to improve from claiming crosses. There were no such concerns in this one, but we all know about the mistakes he's made this season. But we were used to talk about Flecken, about him winning us points. Flecken's strength was probably with the ball at his feet and things like that. And it's hard to tell whether he's winning his points by playing out nice passes from the back. Whereas Kelleher will win his points because of his shot stopping. His shot stopping is so good. And, that Rangers chance is probably the only other big chance that we gave away apart from the goal, which is good for 90 minutes against City. But, Kelleher can come up and make those big saves. It can make the difference. And I think he'll keep doing that. I think he just needs to round his game off a little bit more. Perhaps he's used to playing in a Liverpool team that maybe didn't invite so much pressure, didn't maybe have so many crosses to deal with. He had Van Dijk in front of him before. So, he's adapting. He's a number one now. He's the main man. He's got quite a way into his career and built up quite a reputation of being quite a good number two. So, he's done well for himself until now. But I think he'll grow into the role. Shot stopping, yeah, like you said, without question. I think he's the best shot stopping keeper we've had.
Yeah, and it is a great save. And watching it back, it comes in so quickly that he just has to throw a hand up at it. And well, you got to give Reinders credit. What a connection as well, though, from a ball coming across like that. Dan, I don't know if you agree. It felt like there was literally nothing from us in that first half. I've got a couple of stats for you. I suppose, one real stat and one fact. It's the first time in our Premier League tenure that we had 0 touches in an opposition's area in the first half. And I think that the fact that we only had 1 shot on goal in the first half, which was off target, wasn't even on target, came in the 36th minute, just shows how lackluster we were in that first 45.
Yeah, that was a concern. It wasn't working. I mean, even when we had a corner, I think it was a terrible corner. And then didn't we go short with the corner and then we never actually got it into the box. And then we had a throw in and it was a foul throw in. And we weren't even doing like the things that we normally do well to put any pressure on them. And I think that was a concern. I think Thiago and Sharda didn't really work together as a front two as they did against Chelsea. Against Chelsea, they looked really good getting behind, playing off of each other. Sharda's ever frustrating with his touch and he just can't keep it near him. And, it wasn't a good game from him again. And he's not really stepped up like we wanted him to. And then if it's not really working with the front two and you're trying to go long into them, you're not really creating anything, especially if your set pieces, you're suddenly foul throwing, you're suddenly doing all those foul throws and not making the most of your chances. I think that was a big disappointment first half, but I think it all comes back to us overall being too passive, not aggressive enough, not pressing enough, not confident enough to go on and really try and hurt them. Because, as soon as you're 1-0 down so early on, first of all, you worry about, okay, don't get battered here. But then second of all, you got to start thinking about, all right, we need to score at some point. And, even going on to the second half, we were better, but I think certain decisions didn't really go with the fact that we need to score a goal, which we'll go on to.
Yeah, there's not really much else to talk about from that first half, that's for sure. So, like you said, Keith Andrews probably gets into it a little bit at half time. We come out of the blocks really quickly. And Thiago has a great chance to put the ball in the back of the net right after half time. And it kind of looks like he's too worried about Nico O'Reilly getting too close to him. The ball then gets caught in his feet. And it's like, I don't know whether to shoot early, chip the goalie, go around him. He's kind of caught in 3 minds. He's caught in 3 minds as to what he wants to do. But the ball has to end up in the back of the net then, surely.
Well, then you've got the most massive keeper in front of you. He's quite intimidating, is Donnarumma, and I think he may have intimidated Thiago on this occasion. I think it looks like he's trying to get it onto his right foot, and O'Reilly's kind of covering that side. So the right thing to do is to just try and get it out on his left, get an angle, and try and finish.
You say he tries to get it on his right foot, yet that goal he scored against United, puts it in the top corner, was with his left foot.
I know, less time to think about it, I guess. He just kind of whacked it, didn't he? This time he had, a few touches. He just never really got it under control, but he needed to go out to that left and just try and sweep it in with his left. We know he can do it, as he said. In the end, he doesn't really do much at all. He just hits it straight at Donnarumma, and it's not even a particularly difficult save for him. But that was the big moment, and against these big sides, you've got to take those chances. I mean, Keith Andrews said it himself. They took their big chance. We didn't take ours. Keith Andrews also said he thought about switching to a back four at halftime, which I thought was interesting, considering he went on to not do that at any point in the second half.
So City had 1 shot in the second half, and it is only the 7th time under Pep Guardiola that Manchester City have had 1 or less shots in a half of football. Does that show that, bar the Thiago chance, they nullified us, or we just didn't really threaten them enough?
I think they've been pegged back late on in a few of their games recently. So I think there's probably a bit of, mental fragility on their side that, they might have been a bit worried about that happening again. So I think they would have loved to get the second and put it to bed. I thought we defended quite well. We were better. We were more aggressive. But at the same time, they were quite comfortable as well. We didn't do enough to hurt them apart from that Thiago chance. I think we need to talk about the subs. I think
let's do that now. Let's talk about the subs. Firstly, we'll talk about Fabio, and then we'll talk about the other subs. So Fabio, obviously wasn't involved in the squad last week, so we can't include that one. But since the Chelsea game, he obviously came on in the 90th minute in the Chelsea game and he scored, which is fantastic. Obviously, on this point. Fulham away, he comes on in the 87th minute, plays those 3 minutes plus whatever injury time was. And then City, he comes on in the 92nd minute. And I think he gave the ball away a couple of times as soon as he came on, but you can't get into a game that late. What does he have to do to for one, be involved in the game earlier or start a game? What does he have to do?
This is infuriating. I think this is where the criticism of Keith Andrews is justified because, first of all, it's general principle. Although I agree with a back five, I don't mean for the whole 94 minutes if you're losing 1-0 and you're trying to get back into the game. I think with 20 minutes to go, that's when you can take a risk. I'd rather lose 2-0 and go down fighting than, just limp to a 1-0 defeat. And Carvalho's got a record as little as he's played, and even under Thomas Frank, he has a record that he can come on and he can make an impact late on. He does score goals. And for someone who's never really had any sort of rhythm in the first team, that's quite impressive. And you've got to give him longer. And the fact that it was only at that moment in the 92nd minute that we changed from a back five to a slightly more offensive formation, that was infuriating for me because there was something there. You just got to create one chance. And, it's not his fault at all. He must be so frustrated because he has no time to get into these games. And again, Keith Andrews likes to say that he's going to have a big future for us and that he's going to play a big part for us. But you've got to follow that up with, trusting in him and then show him that you trust in him. When you're losing a game, there's nothing to lose. Reece Nelson also didn't make the bench, apparently. And I don't think he's injured anymore. So can we not include him? We are short on attacking options at times, and we've got these attacking options now who aren't even making the bench. Milambo as well, although Milambo hasn't quite looked up to pace when he's played. But Reece Nelson, definitely, he's a player that's played in the Premier League before. Why is he not on the bench? Why does he not have an opportunity to also come on with not long left? Kevin Schade was terrible for the majority of this one. So, you could have had Thiago, Nelson, Carvalho to end the game, and you don't. And instead, you also take off Thiago, our top scorer. You take off Damsgaard and Henderson, probably the best creative midfielders in terms of even Henderson playing those long balls over the top. And then you end up with Yanelt and Onyeka in that midfield in front of a back five. And they're decent players. The subs he made would have been great if we were 1-0 up.
Yeah.
The subs, they're not, Onyeka and Yanelt aren't really likely to create that chance or score that goal that you need. And that's why I'm just so confused. And Henderson as well, we've spoken about it. Why is he not playing 90 minutes apart from that one game? He looked quite surprised when he was called to come off. And, he's the guy that has been producing assists when we've been playing on the counter. And that is the big concern. And I'm probably a little bit surprised, if anything, that there wasn't more of a reaction from the fans when he made those subs, because there wasn't much of a reaction. But it doesn't surprise me if that starts to come.
So I've seen a couple of reports, I'm not sure if you have as well, across social media, Twitter most exclusively, of Strasbourg, Lyon, and Stuttgart being interested in Fabio Carvalho in this upcoming transfer window in January. If you're Fabio, it's hard to look at that and think, why would I stick around for 4 or 5 minutes a game, every game, when apparently the coach has expressed this like a desire of me being in the team and then not playing me. I think this season he's played less than 100 minutes of Premier League football. If you're Fabio, I don't even say it's jumping ship, because he hasn't really been given any opportunity to show what he's made of here. Do you take that opportunity and go elsewhere, play regular football, and then come back? Or are we just trying to do you earn your place here, or do you play football? Because it's hard to see how he's earning his place here when he's not being given opportunities.
I think I know what his dad would say.
I
reckon, you know what, if it's a loan and if he can come back as a even more rounded player, and if that would give him more of a chance of starting games for us next season, then I wouldn't be opposed to it, because clearly we're not that keen on using him over other players at the moment, and it would benefit us from the long term if he was to come back a better player.
Yeah.
But it would be a shame. He's always had a bit of a difficult time at Brentford. He came in just as Damsgaard became our best player, essentially, whereas before that he wasn't, he's average at best, probably. And that's probably maybe where he'd like to play most, number 10. He's not, he doesn't have that presence that maybe Kevin Schade has in terms of his height or his pace. He's got an eye for goal, definitely, but is his all-round game maybe as good as some of the other players we have? And is that why he's not starting many games or not having much time to make an impact? Possibly. I don't think he's really found his place in the team yet. Even in cup games, he's had a few good games, but also a few games where he's not been so good and perhaps been outshone. So for him personally, he probably does need time away where he can be trusted and be the main man for someone. But at the same time, you think he can also be useful for us, even if that is off the bench, and you need to give him a bit longer.
Yeah. So talking about the subs in the game still, obviously we made all 5 substitutions, and some of them were questionable. I think one was the only one which was enforced, and Yarmo was the one that went down with an injury. Hopefully nothing too serious, just precaution, get him off, especially with the international break now. He's got a couple of weeks to recover. Fingers crossed there's nothing there. But we had Jensen for Damsgaard, Thiago off for Utara, Yarmo, as I just said, for Frank Onyeka, Hendo for Vitali, which was a confusing one, and then in the 92nd minute, Christopher Ayer off for Fab. So give him his dues, I suppose. We did go to a back 4 for 3 minutes of the game while the referee was adding that extra time on. But Henderson was a strange one. Didn't really expect him to go off, as you say, because he's played that 90 minutes. I think it was against United that he played the 90 minutes, wasn't it?
Chelsea, I think.
Anyway, he played 190 minutes, didn't he? And you're thinking, all right, let's go. It's starting to happen. And then you see Thiago going off for Dango. And like you said, Kevin was crap. He was awful on Sunday. On Sunday, he wasn't great at all. So, and as fans, and like you're saying, we can see that that's a substitute that needs to be made. Get Schade off, get Dango on. But the difference between Schade and Dango is when the ball is in the air and you're watching them, it looks like Dango expects Thiago to win that ball, and he's already running. But Schade, he's so static sometimes that it takes him a minute to react and then get running. By that point, the ball is too far away from him, no matter how fast he is. And obviously, he's had to learn to be quick because he's got to chase after his first touch. That's the only reason I can imagine that Schade is quick. And if fans can see it, surely a qualified coach, Premier League coach, can see that you don't take off your top scorer, you don't take off the player that's chasing down and causing the defence trouble. You take off the lazy fart who still stood on the left wing and bring on someone else who is going to chase him down. That just seemed like a strange substitute for me.
Yeah, I mean, or you go to a back 4 and leave Schade on if you must, and have Dango on one side and Thiago in the middle, get Carvalho on for Schade. It just doesn't come across at all like he had belief that we could get something out of that game. It doesn't surprise me that Henderson went off because that Chelsea game seems to very much be an exception. He still seems to get hooked every game, but he can do it. He's not asking to come off. I think he was quite surprised when he was called to come off. We know what he can do in terms of providing those assists over the top for someone like Schade or Thiago. So you got to leave him on. Damsgaard, not been at his best for the last couple of weeks, but we know what he can do. I don't think you need to take him off in that situation. I know what Onyeka and Yanel can't do. And that's probably create those chances in that same way. So it's really concerning. It is even weirder that Keith Andrews said that he was considering changing to a back 4 at half time, but then he clearly didn't consider it again until the 92nd minute. So yeah, we just weren't creating anything really, apart from the Thiago chance. And yeah, the subs just weird. You just never thought we was going to score with those subs.
Yeah, so those subs happened on the 68th minute where Thiago goes off for Utara and Damsgaard goes off for Jensen. That's the 68th minute. We've got 22 plus injuries to go. Surely, when you're 1-0 down, you've been on top prior to those substitutes. You've been on top of the game, on top of the opposition in that second half, and we were on top of City for that 23-minute spell before the substitutes happened. Then we don't change the formation. We make like for like substitutes, which don't change the game. Keith Andrews has to take a risk at some point, right?
Well, it comes back to what I've said before, that maybe that first game against Forest shocked him a little bit, and he's been a bit cautious ever since. But yeah, he's got to do more. I don't know whether he's hoping for a set piece and we score a goal that way at some point. But like I said, you can have that threat, but you also want to show a bit more. And, we have players who can show a bit more. And it was just the wrong decision. Like, I'd rather lose 2-3-0 and go down with fight than 1-0, because I came away from that game genuinely thinking that we may have missed a chance here to get a point or three. And it was because of the subs, because we actively made subs that reduced the likelihood of us scoring. And when we make mistakes like that, doesn't matter how good the opposition are, you're going to kick yourself. And that was the big frustration. I don't think it's fair to criticize him for, playing about five to begin with and the lineup to begin with and all that. But the subs, I don't think you can really defend him on those subs in this game.
It's when you continue to make like for like substitutions that make no impact on the game consistently that becomes concerning, because Fulham was. I think I'm angry about the Fulham game because it's Fulham. I'm really angry because it's Fulham more than the decisions that he made. But when you're 3-1 down and you're making 3 or 4 defensive substitutes and you don't change your style of play to chase a game, that's concerning as a football fan, and especially at one of your rivals. That's, I think, why we got so heated about that one. But we can see clearly City were there. City were there for the taking. We could have got something from that game. We could have got a point or 3, as you say. Yet that change doesn't happen. That was the first time in 14 games that we haven't scored a goal.
I think there'll be more times this season.
Right, let's. I don't think there's really much else that we could talk about from this City game. It was 1-0, kind of a drab first half. We gave it a go in the second half, but we never really threatened them. But we're 7 games into the season now. We've reached our first international break. We're 16th. Touchwood, thankfully, again, still have never been in the bottom 3. We've won twice, obviously at home to Villa and at home to United. Drawn the one, which was the 2-2 against Chelsea, and we've lost 4 games. Out of those 7, we scored 9, we've conceded 12. Only the bottom 3 have conceded more goals than us. Is that cause for concern?
When you don't have 2 20-goal season strikers up front to make up for it, because we did concede quite a lot last year, then it's more of a concern. I think you could also argue that there have been games where we have been defensively quite good and we haven't given a lot away, including this one. So I don't think we're absolutely terrible at the back. I think we can get it right. We've got the players to get it right. You've had Kelleher settling in early this season. So I don't think it's a massive concern. You look at the games we played as well, especially the home games. You've had a lot of tough home games so far. Of course, there's been a couple of games which have been a disaster, and that's added, at least half of our goals conceded have come in that Fulham and Forest game. So take them out, and it's not been a disaster. But we can't keep affording to have those performances chucked in there every now and again.
Yeah, I know we've touched upon it, but when we play that back 5 and we don't make the change to impact the game, is that just lack of experience from Keith Andrews?
I think there are some rookie errors in there. Even the way we set up against Forest on opening day, I think that was probably the time to be a bit more cautious with who we had missing. And he was a bit naive. I think he got shocked by that first half. And there has been periods, again, where you think, there's been periods where you think actually he's adapting, actually he's learning from his mistakes. But then there's also periods where you think, I don't understand where you're coming from and why you've made that decision. And it probably is down to his brief time in the job, his limited experience. But yeah, it's too soon to give up on him. I think even before the season started, you look at those fixtures, you see Villa at home, Chelsea at home, United at home, and City at home, and then Liverpool at home as our first 4 or 5 home games. I think it was always a potential struggle, given that we're always usually better at home. The fact that even some of our away games, Sunderland, are actually quite good now. We probably played Forest at the wrong time. I'd much rather play them now than when they had Nuno in charge. So it's difficult, and it's going to carry on being difficult for the next month and a bit. So I think we've got to stick with it. I think the standard of the Premier League this season in general for the neutral is very good, very entertaining. It's hard to predict the results of games at the top and at the bottom. There doesn't seem to be an absolutely terrible team. And if there is, like West Ham a couple of weeks ago, they'll make that change. They'll get a new manager, and I think they'll be better now. So it's entertaining. It's potentially some close shaves ahead for us, given who we've got coming up as well. But we've not been absolutely awful. There have been some good things, but there's also definitely areas for improvement. And at least we've got some of these home games out of the way now, and we've got the easier home games in theory to come.
Easier notes. We've we've dropped 8 points, I think, from winning positions already this season, which shows that we are in games. We dropped all 3 away at Sunderland. We dropped all 3 away at Fulham, and 2 points against Chelsea, because obviously we was ahead in that game as well. We're in all of these games without picking up maximum points. Does it go down to Keith Andrews' changes and the substitutes that he makes that allow us to see out those games? Or is it those that are on the pitch that are responsible for seeing out? I know it can kind of go both ways, but when the substitutes that the manager makes doesn't seem to benefit those on the pitch, it's difficult to know, isn't it? And football fans are fickle, so they have to blame someone. And it's difficult to know where to put that blame at the moment.
I mean, this stat is nothing new. It's not a Keith Andrews thing. We always drop loads of points from winning positions under Thomas Frank as well. I don't know. You look at each game individually. The Fulham game, we probably never deserved to be ahead. We were never that good. They made a mistake and we scored from it. Again, the Chelsea game, it's not a bad result. They're always probably going to threaten at some point because of who they are. So, again, the main concern is probably still conceding in 2s at times, like we did against Fulham, which has always worried me a little bit. But, it's a young manager, it's a young team, apart from Henderson. I don't think that can be underestimated. It is actually a really, really young team that we have now. Subs, he got it wrong against City. I don't think they've always been terrible, but sometimes he's restricted by the options he has on the bench in terms of attacking options this season. You would worry if we were to have a bit of an injury crisis now, because this is us almost at full strength at the moment, and we're just about getting by in some games. So we're certainly not as good as we have been in previous seasons. I think we need to see Reece Nelson introduced more. I think we need to see Carvalho more when we're not winning games. I think that's the big change he needs to make. I think someone like Onyeka generally has been quite good when he's come on to finish the game instead of Henderson. But there's a time and a place for him, and it's not when we're losing, I'm afraid.
No. You've already mentioned it. We've got West Ham away after the international break, and there are only 5 games between this international break and the next one, which is West Ham away, Liverpool at home, Grimsby away in the Cup, and then Palace and Newcastle as well. Palace away, and then I believe it's Newcastle at home, isn't it? Realistically, looking at this, it's difficult because football's a funny old game. It's really difficult, isn't it? It would be naive of us to say Grimsby is a dead certain, because we've seen what they've done to Manchester United. We saw what they did to Sheffield Wednesday as well. So it would be naive, and we've lost some shockers in the past as well. Plymouth most recently, Gillingham before that. I was there when we lost 4-0 to Oxford, and we've lost to Cambridge in the cup as well. We've lost some shockers, but league-wise, West Ham away, they've obviously, even under Nuno, had 2 not great games. I think they drew up at Everton, didn't they? Which isn't a bad result, and then lost 3-0 on the weekend. I can't remember. To Arsenal.
Yeah.
Going into that game, or knowing that we've got 4 league games and possible 12 points to get, I'm not going to ask you how many we're going to get, but you've got to hope that we pick up a few points in these 4 league games that we've got between the next international break, because going into December, if we're still, I mean, I'm just going to say there's a possibility that we're still on, 7 come that time. What do we need over these next 4 league games?
I think the big concern is the 2 home games are very difficult, and you can say that about all of our home games on paper so far. They are very difficult games, and we're capable of getting results, but it's not guaranteed against Liverpool and Newcastle at home. Whereas if we were, if these fixtures are flipped around and it was West Ham and Palace at home, you'd fancy us to, get some points out of those games. But this way around, I'm not convinced. I think West Ham's a massive game because they're in a similar situation to us. They're obviously worse off than us even. There's points there for us. We generally have a good record going there. It'll be harder. They'll be much tighter under Nuno. They've got Jared Bowen who can score out of nowhere. I think that would relieve the pressure a bit, though, if we were to get a result there going into the Liverpool game. Liverpool, Newcastle.
That's going to be an interesting one. Sorry, before we talk about Liverpool, Newcastle, that's going to be a really interesting one, West Ham, because I believe they've got planned protests in place, haven't they, for our game? So much so that West Ham have started doing adults for £5 and kids for £1 just to try and get people to go to the game. So the atmosphere is going to be a very strange one in that London stadium. Well, it's always a strange one in there anyway, because it's not really a football stadium. But that's going to be a strange one going into that one. But yeah, sorry, Dan, you was going to say Liverpool, Newcastle at home.
Yeah, I mean, with West Ham, I don't think they'll be against the team. I think it's more the ownership. Obviously, I think they'll be behind Nuno, and I think they probably are pretty happy with that appointment. And I do think they'll be good, quite good. And I think it would have been better if we played them a few weeks ago. But we are where we are. Obviously, we've got to wait till the Monday night for that one. I think there's something in that for us, but we've got to be better. This season, under Keith Andrews, we've not shown a lot away from home at all. So that definitely will need to improve for that one. And back 4, please, if we're talking about that. Liverpool and the Newcastle home game, I guess we could bunch them into one. Liverpool especially is a bit of a free hit. Probably expect about 5 at least against Liverpool. Newcastle will depend on how they're doing at the time, I guess. But, we're capable of getting something if we get everything right, but I don't think you can be relying on points in those games, really. And then Palace look brilliant on the whole recently, even when they lost at the weekend. We don't have a bad record against them. I think we've only lost to them once. We've only beaten them once as well. I think we've had a lot of draws against them. So it will be a competitive game. I think the way we play won't suit them because they'll want to counter. And that's when they're best. And that's probably also when we're the best, which is probably why we often clash a little bit. And it's often tight games against them. So potentially something there, but they've got a top manager and they're doing really well at the moment. So they're not to be sniffed at. So it's tough. It's a tough run of fixtures that we've got at the moment. And even generally this season, there's not as many poor teams who you think, oh yeah, I'd like to play them right now. It's a big moment for Keith Andrews. I don't think he's had an easy start to life. I don't think he's got easy circumstances, but he's got to work this team now. We've got to get the most that we can out of each game. That's the thing that we're frustrated about. We're frustrated about not making the most with the subs, not performing very well in certain games. But when we're on it, there'll still probably be tight games. But as long as we perform well, I'll be behind him. But you can imagine people get nervous these days. With the general, everything's kind of worked against us with the general strength of the Premier League, and you can see people becoming very nervous very quickly if we don't get many points out of these ones. I didn't talk about Grimsby. It's not that important if we're talking about Premier League survival. I'd love us to go for it and go far, especially if we do find ourselves comfortable in the Premier League. You'd hope we'd win that one. All I would say is don't make too many changes. Do what you've been doing in the Cup so far. Still have a senior squad on the pitch. Not too many of the B team players. Still take it just as seriously as he has been.
Well, I think that's probably a good place for us to wrap up there. So thank you for that. The Ealing Road podcast will be back for a West Ham preview, but we do have the international break between then and now. So enjoy not having to watch Brentford for a little while, which is not something I say very often. But don't worry, you've got England to frustrate you in between then and now. Please do remember to comment on this pod. Make sure that you talk about our games that we've had so far, the 7 games that we had so far. We want to know what your thoughts are, how you're feeling with Keith Andrews, and the 5 games that we've got coming up after this international break. What are our realistic expectations going into that next break? Again, remember Eden Road on Twitter and the Eden Road pod on Instagram. Dan, thank you very much. Mike, we hope you get better. But until next time, up the bees.
Up the bees.